You wouldn't believe this. I tell people every day, we black troops went overseas to fight the Germans, but we had to fight the Yanks first.
George Taylor was a black soldier, born in Culpeper, Virginia. At the age of 90, he told us his story of that time in Britain.
If I took a British lady to a movie or to a restaurant, I'd have to fight my way out. I'd fight the Americans. The American white troops weren't used to integration, so they couldn't stand to see a black man take a white woman into a pub or whatever.
Neil Wynne is Professor of 20th Century American History at the University of Gloucestershire and has written many books about African Americans and the Second World War. So just explain to us how segregated the US Army was in the 1930s and 40s.
Well, actually, it was totally segregated. There was no integration at all when America entered the Second World War. And, of course, it was a considerable bone of contention amongst African Americans and particularly civil rights organizations at the time. There was a great deal of debate in Britain about how they should respond. And some people argued they should just accept the American practices. And indeed, in the War Cabinet, and it reached War Cabinet level in 1942, there were very strong arguments, particularly from the Secretary of War, James Grigg, to accept segregation and indeed to accept the kind of thinking that lay behind segregation.
So what happened in practical terms?
Thousands of African Americans now appeared in small, out-of-the-way places. Yes, they were in Bristol, and yes, they were in Worcester, and yes, they were in other major cities, but they were also in places like the Forest of Dean, and they were in Cornwall. In fact, the heaviest concentration of African Americans was in the south and the southwest. But it became an issue of conflict, and gradually what happened was that the American forces instituted practices in the locality to try and avert these conflicts. So literally, for example, in the Forest of Dean, the town of Cinderford was put off limits to African Americans. That was for whites only.
Well, the whole town?
Absolutely. Coleford in the Forest of Dean, on the other hand, was for African Americans. Tewkesbury, where there was a major concentration of both black and white American forces, they allocated certain days. Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays for white Americans, and blacks could go into town Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays. Some chip shops were for blacks only and some for whites only.
So this was a de facto segregation, really, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And this is what happens, that as one of the black observers says, that British practices and attitudes notwithstanding, by 1943, 1944, you have in fact got Jim Crow introduced into Britain.
There were incidents that made the papers. A riot in Preston resulted in the death of a black serviceman and became known as the Battle of Bamber Bridge. Teresa Bothwell from Dudley befriended an 18-year-old black GI from the Deep South.
We were standing talking on the pavement, and I spotted 3 white Americans coming along the pavement towards us, and he looked very uncomfortable. Anyway, they came up to us, and the fair-haired one, he said to the coloured boy, he said, "Boy, what are you doing walking on the sidewalk? And what are you doing talking to a young white lady?" So I said, he was just asking for help. "I wasn't talking to you, miss," he said, "I'm asking him." So as the boy went to speak, they pushed him into the gutter. "That's the place for you, boy." I said, "For your information, this is not called a sidewalk. It is called a pavement. And in Britain," I said, "people of all colours are allowed to walk on the pavement." And as we were talking, the one at the back came up behind me, and all of a sudden I felt his arms come right round me and hold me tight. I couldn't move my arms. They pushed this lad into the gutter, but this time they pushed him over. And they kicked him from head to foot. And they kicked him and they kicked him.
Later that same day, Teresa saw 3 black GIs being chased through the town. One ran into a shopping arcade, followed by an American military policeman.
The military police van pulled up, and I said, is he alive or not?" I said, "Because it looks as though he's had his head bashed in." "Oh no, miss," he said, he said, he's dead. He said, that isn't what killed him. He said, he was knifed in the heart. He was resisting arrest rather than be taken. He killed himself. And he looked at me, he said, you don't believe me, do you? I said, no, I don't. I said, I don't believe you. I said, those 3 black men, I said, were not rioting. They tried to run for their lives when they saw the military policeman coming down the road. And the chap that was killed in the doorway was the young man that had been beaten up at lunchtime.
Here again are the voices of some of those men, the group who have banded together when off duty as the American Soldiers' Chorus. They're a group of colored soldiers who are spreading goodwill wherever they go. Whenever their duties are permitted, they've been singing to thousands of people all over Britain.
Going to lay down my burden down, down by the riverside, down, down by the riverside.
However beautiful the music, the wartime propaganda couldn't disguise the tensions between white and black GIs. But what did unite the troops was the mission ahead, the inevitable invasion of Europe. Many soldiers died on the Normandy beaches. Those who survived saw their lives changed forever. And for the girlfriends back in Britain, romances which began in a local dance hall would lead to a new home in a new continent.